In a not-so-distant future, millions of people suddenly disappear from Earth without a trace. News outlets cover the event non-stop. Though it happens abruptly, there have been many warnings before. Yet top political figures firmly reject any connection to God and ignore the fact that the Bible already foretold the rapture. Different theories quickly spread. Some blamed aliens, while others pointed to strange natural causes. Around this time, wealthy elite Jonathan Stone acquires Iden, the world's biggest information system, and begins constructing a temple for a new belief system. Even as crime surges across the globe, airline pilot Rafford Steele, who lost his entire family, is hit hard by the loss. He only remembers his wife Irene's efforts to lead him to God, often taking him to spiritual gatherings. But he never felt the need to change. Everything shifts during a flight, cruising 9 kilometers above ground, when several passengers vanish midair. In that instant, he realizes Irene had been right about the rapture. Now, Ray begins to truly feel the loss of his wife and son, and starts opening his heart to the idea that the rapture was real. Meanwhile, journalist Cameron Buck Williams airs a special program covering the strange disappearances. Reports of rising violent crime fill the news, and experts warn the situation could worsen. His guest, Dr. Kim Cage, is investigating this growing evil and insists a second wave of vanishings is near, something she says was forecasted by a computer model. But just as Buck begins asking deeper questions about the source of the data, the program is cut off. Back at home, Ray tells his daughter Chloe that he's decided to return to work. Elsewhere, Buck, frustrated, goes to confront his boss, Steve Plank, and get answers about who interrupted his broadcast. On the way, his cameraman stops him to apologize, explaining that he had to follow management orders. Buck tells Steve they could simply ban voices that spread fear without facts. So many have lost people they love, and what they truly need is clarity, not panic-inducing stories. Just then, Steve's assistant walks in with a report saying former Romanian ambassador Nicolae Carpatia has been named the UN's new Secretary General. Steve doesn't seem to care. Instead, he warns Buck that his show will be canceled if he doesn't obey the rules. Angry, Buck walks out. Meanwhile, Chloe reflects on her missing brother and feels responsible. Buck, on the other hand, watches a speech from Nicolae, who urges global leaders to merge into one united world government. Afterward, Buck calls his friend Dirk, who suggests they meet in a quiet place to talk more. At the same time, Chloe dreams she's begging the Lord to let her into a room where her brother is. He says nothing, and she keeps knocking helplessly. Her father wakes her up, reminding her that everyone is struggling, but their mother always taught them to focus on what lies ahead. Later, Dirk explains to Buck that the UN is receiving false data from a firm known for fake research. The truth is, no one really knows how many people vanished, or who they were. The numbers are being made up to create panic. Dirk reveals a web of companies secretly controlling global information. 15 TV networks, over 100 radio stations, hundreds of newspapers, and even drug companies are all connected. Steve Plank's name shows up among the involved parties, although Buck still thinks the media group is owned by a popular business family. Dirk points out no one has ever seen that family. In reality, Stone Eagle is behind it all and has been pushing for a worldwide system reset. Buck recalls meeting a striking young woman on a flight during the disappearances. He shows a picture of her, standing next to Chloe. Dirk takes him to a secure room with a hidden vault. Inside is a locked hard drive with a password and a full season of The Simpsons stored on it. Not long after, Chloe meets Buck, who tells her everything Dirk found. He also confesses that he's done being part of it. He once thought he was sharing the truth with the world, but now he realizes he was just being used. Suddenly, all devices receive an alert that a second wave of disappearances is beginning. Buck returns to the studio, still searching for at least one first-hand witness. Some guests suggest similar disappearances may have happened in ancient history, but there's still no confirmed evidence that the rapture truly occurred. Buck then brings up the idea that new technology might be misleading millions of people. Shortly after, a notice comes in about a UN conference starting, where Stone Eagle is giving a speech urging everyone to come together against a rising threat. As the Great Reset begins, many nations will face financial collapse and others will fall into poverty. To respond, the UN adopts a unified payment system called Eden, developed by scientist Rosenwag, who donates it to the global government. Buck takes part in a live interview with Stone Eagle, who states that the first step is to secure peace in the Middle East. Later on, Buck tells Steve that the second wave happened exactly as Dr. Kim Cage had warned, and she's now revealed to be working with supporters of one global government that uses fear of disaster as a tool. Still, Buck has yet to find solid proof of the second appearance. Most of the evidence comes from Stone Eagle's company, about 90% of it. Steve blocks Buck from sharing his findings with the public. Meanwhile, Ray checks Irene's phone and finds the Bible. But strangely, no results come up about the rapture when he searches. The New Hope Church account is restricted, and the pastor's contact is gone. Ray drives to the church and finds it locked up with broken windows. He uses a golf club to break in through the back and finds the pastor in the damaged sanctuary. At the same time, Chloe is attacked by a thug. She keeps her bag, but injures her hand in the fight. While gathering her things, she discovers a flyer from New Hope Church. Ray, meanwhile, is helping the wounded pastor during what looks like an attack. The pastor tells Ray that the disappearances are in fact the rapture. He assures Ray that his wife and son are safe. He asks Ray to leave so he can finish his work. At the same time, Chloe visits a familiar doctor who treats her hand and introduces her to a dying patient. Ray continues looking for a scientific explanation for the event. The pastor points out his mistake. The Bible talks about 7 years of peace between Israel and its enemies. And when that time starts, the Antichrist, someone posing as Christ, will be revealed. The pastor admits he never really believed it before, which made him a false teacher, just as the Bible predicted. He hands Ray a video message meant for those left behind. Meanwhile, the doctor and her patient try to get Chloe to believe what's happening, the same way her mother did with all her heart. Chloe struggles to understand why some believers are still here. Ray keeps listening to a sermon that recalls Paul's letter to the Corinthians, warning about the ascension and urging faith in the Lord. The pastor joins Ray, who for the first time begins to pray with true understanding. Meanwhile, Dirk tries to break into the main Eden server without having the password. Then, out of nowhere, he gets a message from someone who knows what he's doing and sends him the access key. Dirk logs into the system. An old co-worker of Ray's shows up again. She's still hoping to restart the romance that had just begun between them. She now has a job at the UN and offers to recommend Ray for a position, but he turns her down. He's sure that the rapture took place and has already accepted Christ. She walks away, refusing to hear anything about God. Dirk reveals that the Eden system holds an enormous amount of data, and from what he can tell, someone plans to reveal it to the world. While the TV broadcasts Nikolai Carpathia's arrival at the UN, he's welcomed by a cheering crowd. Buck returns with Dirk, who explains that beyond managing the global financial system, Eden also tracks biometric data and online profiles. Whoever controls Eden has power over everything, even access to basic food. The person who provided the password is ready to hand over all the data so Buck can expose the truth. Dirk suggests doing the interview himself instead of Buck. This way, if he's caught, Buck can still bring the truth to the world. Later, Buck tells his assistant that he's found a massive story, unaware that a colleague is snapping photos of his documents and alerting the higher-ups. Meanwhile, Ray tries to get Chloe to go to church, but she refuses. A sick woman overhears and insists on seeing the pastor. Back at the office, Steve announces that Buck is fired. At the same time, Ray finds boxes filled with flyers at the church explaining everything. Just then, some women arrive with Chloe, ready to hear the pastor's message. Dirk highlights the line in the code showing 3 important dates: the day of the first vanishings, the start of the second wave, and a third day that's 3 days later, even though the code was written before any of these events. It turns out Eden's creator knew everything in advance. Buck keeps searching for someone who lost family in the second wave. He asks Dirk to look up 3 names in the system, but they find out those people never existed. Together, they go to meet the person who sent the password. Buck helps load the filming gear while Dirk arranges the boxes, and then finds a bomb set on timer. He manages to warn the others, but the bomb goes off, and Dirk dies in the fire. Elsewhere, Chloe asks the pastor why even some non-believers vanished. He explains that Jesus had already spoken of this, and prayer is needed to find direction and protection because half the remaining people will perish. He reads verses about the ascension, and suddenly, Chloe walks away. Meanwhile, Stony Eagle and Rosenwag approach Carpathia for support with their plan, but he believes things are already running smoothly without them. At church, the pastor reminds everyone that Judgment Day will strike midway through a 7-year period when the Antichrist declares himself as God, and the world will follow him. Buck goes to Dirk's secret location and gains access to his laptop. Federal agents show up, and Buck has to flee, hiding inside a dumpster. One of the agents, furious at losing him, shoots at the dumpster and damages the laptop. Around the same time, Stony Eagle tells Nikolai that he picked him to be his successor. Buck receives a video from the cameraman saying agents are tearing the studio apart and that Buck's assistant may have drowned in the tub. Before the video cuts off, the cameraman says everything happening was already predicted in the Bible. Meanwhile, a doctor asks Ray some questions. She explains that her husband and Ray's wife were true believers, and she wants to understand why Ray didn't believe before. He admits he was careless and lost. But now, he finally understands what Irene was trying to say. Having faith means reaching for Christ even when unsure. All one has to do is open the door, because the Lord is calling. Later, Buck finds Chloe near the grave she dug for her mother. They open the coffin and find only a dress. Undeniable evidence of the rapture and proof of God's existence emerge. They head to the church where the remaining believers have gathered, but Buck still refuses to accept it, while Chloe chooses to stay close to her father. The journalist reaches out to Rosanu and shares what he uncovered about Stony Eagle, who had been misusing the Eden system and secretly installed spyware. The scientist then visits Nikolai, who instructs him to bring Buck along. At that time, Ray shows Buck the results of his research based on biblical study. Buck laughs off his ideas until he suddenly spots a phrase that turns out to be Eden's access code and starts reviewing Ray's diagram. It becomes clear that building the Eden Temple and forming a peace treaty with Israel were both secretly orchestrated by Stone Eagle, suggesting he could be the Antichrist. Buck doesn't accept this. He's already seen what Eden contains and knows that whoever controls it will have global power. Buck leaves, carrying a crucifix given to him by Chloe. The next day, he meets with Rosenwig, who admits he always wanted to build a temple on the Temple Mount, which is why Stone Eagle's offer meant so much to him. Buck hears about the initial 7-year peace treaty and realizes he was mistaken. He turns to God, asking for forgiveness and the strength to stay on the right path. He contacts his cameraman for assistance. Together, they head to the UN, where Buck announces that Stone Eagle not only seeks to control the world's finances, but also to drive it into a state of digital control. Nikolai responds, saying he knows what's going to happen next. A man dressed as a security guard suddenly draws a weapon and attempts to shoot. But then Nikolai grabs the gun and kills both Rosenwig and Stone Eagle himself. The crowd watches without reacting. Nikolai then proclaims that he must now take total control. Only afterward do the people appear to regain awareness, believing the guard was the one who fired. Buck calls out to his cameraman, who is already set up in a vehicle, and begins broadcasting Buck's footage from a different place entirely. As Nikolai begins his press conference, the live feed abruptly switches to Buck's footage, exposing the truth and disproving the UN leader's explanation of the disappearances. Agents attempt to track Buck, but they only recover his phone after he has already revealed the truth to the world. Buck escapes and reaches the airstrip, where Ray, Chloe, and the pastor are preparing to board a plane. As they take off, the pastor reflects on the group's deepening faith and reminds them that the second coming is still 7 years away, years that will be the darkest in human history. The aircraft flies above the city, dropping countless pamphlets from New Age churches, which are collected by curious onlookers below.